Dr. Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around the docking bay of Medical Station Harmony. The place was huge, bigger than any hospital he had ever seen on Earth. Strange lights floated in the air without any wires or supports. The walls seemed to glow with a soft blue color that changed to green as he watched. Jake picked up his medical bag and walked toward the main entrance. He had trained for this moment for 3 years. He was the first human doctor ever assigned to work at an alien medical station. The Galactic Medical Council had finally agreed to let humans join their hospitals, but Jake knew many aliens were not happy about it. As he walked through the entrance, Jake noticed how quiet everything was. On Earth, hospitals were always noisy, places with people talking, machines beeping, and feet running down hallways. Here he could barely hear anything except a soft humming sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. A tall, thin creature approached him. It looked like it was made of clear crystal that sparkled in the strange light. Jake had studied alien biology, so he knew this was a Velthari. They were one of the most advanced medical species in the galaxy. Dr. Morrison, I presume. The crystal, being said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I am Chief Medical Officer Zixthera. Welcome to Medical Station Harmony. Jake held out his hand for a handshake, but Zixthera stepped back quickly. Jake remembered his training, and instead gave a small bow which seemed to relax the alien doctor. Thank you for having me, Jake said. I am excited to learn from the best doctors in the galaxy. Zixthera's crystal body flickered with different colors. Jake had read that this was how Velthari showed emotions, but he could not remember what the colors meant. Yes, well, Zixthera said slowly, we are also curious to learn about human medicine. Your species comes from what we classify as a Class 12 Deathworld. Such extreme conditions must have created unique medical challenges. Jake nodded. Earth was indeed a dangerous place compared to most alien worlds. They had diseases, predators, natural disasters, and 1,000 other things that could kill a person. Most alien species came from peaceful planets where the biggest medical emergency might be a small cut or a mild fever. Dr. Keelnara will show you around the station. Zixthera continued. She is one of our finest surgeons. Another alien approached them. This one looked more familiar to Jake because it had a basic humanoid shape, but it had 6 arms instead of 2. Its skin was a pale green color, and it had large black eyes that took up most of its face. Hello, Dr. Morrison, Keelnara said. Her voice was soft and musical. I have read about human medicine. It is very different from our methods. As they walked through the station, Jake could see patients from dozens of different species. Some floated in tanks filled with glowing liquid. Others lay on beds that seemed to hover in the air. Everything looked so advanced and peaceful. How many patients do you treat here? Jake asked. We have about 500 patients at any time, Keelnara replied. Most stay for several months while they recover from their treatments. Several months? Jake was surprised. On Earth, most patients were in and out of the hospital in a few days unless they had something really serious. Oh yes, Keelnara said. We believe in very gentle healing. We never rush the body's natural recovery process. For example, if someone breaks a bone, we place them in a healing chamber for 6 months to make sure it heals perfectly. Jake thought about the broken bones he had treated on Earth. Most people were back to normal activities in 6 to 8 weeks. 6 months seemed like a very long time. They entered what Keelnara called the surgical suite. Jake looked around for the operating tables and surgical tools he was used to, but instead he saw what looked like meditation rooms with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. This is where we perform our surgeries, Keelnara explained. First, the patient meditates for 3 days to prepare their mind and body. Then we use healing crystals and energy fields to make very small corrections to their internal systems. The whole process takes about 2 weeks, and the patient never feels any pain or discomfort. Jake was amazed. On Earth, surgery was fast and direct. Doctors cut open the body, fixed the problem, and sewed it back up. Most surgeries took a few hours, not 2 weeks. What about emergency cases? Jake asked. What if someone is bleeding badly or has a heart attack? Keelnara looked confused. Heart attack? I am not familiar with this term. When the heart stops working suddenly, Jake explained. Oh, cardiac cessation, Keelnara said. That is very rare among civilized species. When it happens, we place the patient in a stasis field and slowly encourage the heart to resume beating over several days. We would never do anything sudden or violent to the heart muscle. Jake remembered his training in CPR, where doctors pushed hard and fast on the chest to restart the heart. The idea of doing chest compressions for 30 minutes straight would probably terrify these gentle aliens. They continued the tour, and Jake began to understand how different human medicine really was. These aliens had never developed trauma surgery because they rarely had trauma. They had never learned to work fast because their patients could wait. They had never needed to cause pain to prevent death because death from injury was almost unknown on their peaceful worlds. As the day ended, Jake sat in his new quarters thinking about what he had learned. The aliens were incredibly advanced, in many ways, but their medicine was designed for a safe, gentle universe. Human medicine was designed for a world that was constantly trying to kill its inhabitants. Jake looked at his medical diploma hanging on the wall. At the bottom, in small letters, were the words of the Hippocratic oath, "First, do no harm." But Jake was beginning to realize that humans and aliens had very different ideas about what those words meant. Tomorrow, he would start working with patients. He wondered how long it would take before his new colleagues realized that sometimes doing no harm meant being willing to cause a little harm to prevent something much worse. Outside his window, Jake could see Earth in the distance, a small blue dot that looked peaceful from far away. But he knew the truth about his home world, and soon the galaxy would learn it too. Jake had been working at Medical Station Harmony for only 3 days when the emergency alarm started ringing. The sound was soft and musical, nothing like the harsh sirens he was used to on Earth. But the flashing lights told him something serious was happening. He ran toward the emergency bay, his medical bag in hand. As he moved through the corridors, he noticed that the other doctors were walking quickly but not running. Even in an emergency, they seemed calm and peaceful. Jake burst through the doors of the emergency bay and stopped. The scene in front of him was chaos, but a very quiet kind of chaos. Dozens of injured aliens lay on floating beds while alien doctors moved between them with slow, careful movements. Dr. Zixthara approached him, her crystal body flashing red and orange colors that Jake was beginning to understand meant stress and worry. There has been a collision between 2 cargo ships near the station, she explained. 7 different species were injured. We have never seen injuries this severe before. Jake looked around the room and saw what the aliens meant. To them, these injuries were terrible. But to Jake, they looked like things he had treated many times during his residency at Chicago General Hospital. Broken bones, cuts that needed stitches, and some internal bleeding. Serious, but treatable. "What is your treatment plan?" Jake asked. "We are preparing the healing chambers," Dr. Keelnara said as she approached with 2 of her 6 arms full of glowing crystals. "We will place the most injured patients in stasis while we prepare for long-term healing therapy. The process should take several months." "Several months?" Jake looked at the patients again. "Some of these people will die if you wait that long." Keelnara looked confused. "Die? We do not let patients die. We will keep them stable in stasis until their bodies are ready for healing." Jake walked over to examine the nearest patient. It was a glimmering, one of the butterfly-like aliens he had read about. The creature's delicate wings were torn, and Jake could see signs of internal bleeding in its abdomen. Its breathing was shallow and fast. "This patient is going into shock," Jake said. "It needs immediate treatment." "We are preparing the stasis chamber now," an alien nurse said softly. "It will be ready in 2 hours." 2 hours? Jake felt his heart rate increase. This patient will be dead in 30 minutes without treatment. The alien doctor stared at him. Death in 30 minutes was something they had never encountered. On their peaceful worlds, medical emergencies developed slowly over days or weeks. Jake made a decision that would change everything. He opened his medical bag and pulled out supplies he had brought from Earth. The alien doctors watched in horror as he put on rubber gloves and began to prepare for emergency surgery. "What are you doing?" Dr. Zixthara asked, her crystal body now flashing bright red. "Saving this patient's life," Jake said. He looked at the Glimmering's injuries and began to work. First, he started an IV line to give the patient fluids and blood replacement. The aliens gasped as Jake pushed a needle into the patient's arm. To them, deliberately causing pain to a patient was unthinkable. "You are hurting it!" Nara cried out. "A small hurt now prevents a big hurt later," Jake said as he prepared to make an incision in the patient's abdomen to stop the internal bleeding. The alien doctors backed away in shock as Jake used a scalpel to cut through the glimmering skin. Some of them made sounds that Jake realized were prayers or death songs. They thought he was killing the patient. Jake worked quickly and efficiently. He found the source of the bleeding and stopped it with techniques he had learned during his trauma surgery rotation. He repaired the damaged organs and closed the incision with surgical staples. The whole procedure took 45 minutes. To Jake, it was routine emergency surgery. To the watching aliens, it looked like he had attacked and tortured the patient. "Why did you do that?" Dr. Zixathera whispered. "The poor creature suffered so much." "Look at its vital signs," Jake said, pointing to the monitors he had connected to the patient. The Glimmering's breathing had become steady and strong. Its heart rate was normal. The signs of shock were gone. The patient was stable and would make a full recovery. The alien doctors could not believe what they were seeing. A patient that had been dying was now healing rapidly. But the method Jake had used seemed like violence to them. Word spread quickly through the station about what the human doctor had done. By the end of the day, Jake had treated 12 more patients using what he considered basic emergency medicine. Each time, the alien staff watched in horror as he performed procedures they had never seen before. He set broken bones by moving them back into place with his hands. The aliens were shocked that he would cause pain by manipulating the patient's body. He gave injections of pain medicine and antibiotics. The aliens could not understand why he would put chemicals directly into a patient's bloodstream. Most shocking of all, Jake performed CPR on a patient whose heart had stopped. He pushed hard and fast on the patient's chest, then breathed air into their lungs. To the aliens, it looked like he was attacking an unconscious victim, but the patient's heart started beating again, and they survived. By the end of the emergency, Jake had saved 37 lives. Under the alien medical system, at least 20 of those patients would have died while waiting for the slow, gentle treatment to begin. As Jake cleaned up his equipment, he noticed that the other doctors were avoiding him. They whispered to each other in their own languages and looked at him with fear and confusion. Dr. Nara finally approached him, all 6 of her arms shaking slightly. "Dr. Morrison," she said quietly, "what you did today was amazing, but also terrifying. You caused pain to heal pain. You cut into bodies to save lives. You forced hearts to beat and lungs to breathe. In our culture, these things are acts of violence, not medicine." Jake sat down heavily in a chair. He was tired from working for 12 straight hours, but he was also beginning to understand the problem he faced. "On Earth," he said slowly, "we have a saying in medicine. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. Sometimes causing a little harm prevents a lot of harm." Nara stared at him with her large black eyes. "Your planet must be a very dangerous place to create such medicine." Jake nodded. "It is. And that danger taught us how to save lives quickly, even if it means causing pain or fear." As Jake walked back to his quarters, he could hear the alien doctors talking about him in hushed voices. He caught words like violent, dangerous, and frightening. He realized that his colleagues were not just confused by human medicine, they were afraid of it. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring new challenges. The aliens had seen what human medicine could do, but they did not understand why it had to be done that way. Jake wondered if they ever would. 2 weeks after the emergency, Dr. Zixathera called Jake to her office. The crystal alien was flashing colors that Jake had learned meant she was nervous and uncertain. "Dr. Morrison," she said, "the Galactic Medical Council has requested that you give a demonstration of human medical techniques to our medical students. They want to understand how you achieved such remarkable results during the emergency." Jake felt excited. This was his chance to show the galaxy that human medicine could help save lives everywhere. "I would be happy to teach them," he said. The Sci demonstration will be broadcast to medical schools across 17 star systems. Sixth Thera continued. This is a great honor for both you and our station. 3 days later, Jake stood in the main teaching amphitheater. The room was filled with medical students from dozens of different species. Some floated in the air, others sat on specially designed chairs, and a few hung from the ceiling using natural appendages. All of them watched Jake with curious eyes. Jake had prepared carefully for this moment. He had volunteers from the station, staff who would help him demonstrate basic human medical procedures. He started with the simplest technique he could think of. Today I will show you some basic life-saving procedures that every human doctor learns, Jake began. These techniques can be used when someone is dying and needs immediate help. The students leaned forward with interest. Emergency medicine was something most of them had never seen before. First, I will demonstrate CPR, which stands for cardiopulmonary resuscitation, Jake said. This is used when someone's heart stops beating. Jake had Dr. Kielnara lie down on a table to serve as his patient. He knelt beside her and placed his hands on her chest. When the heart stops, we push hard and fast on the chest to force blood through the body, Jake explained. He began the compression movements, pushing down firmly and quickly. The audience gasped. Several students made sounds of distress. To them, it looked like Jake was attacking Kielnara, hitting her chest over and over again. You push hard enough to break ribs if necessary, Jake continued, not noticing the horrified looks on the students' faces. Then you breathe air directly into the patient's lungs. Jake tilted Kielnara's head back and breathed into her mouth. The alien students were now making sounds that Jake realized were cries of horror and disgust. Stop, called out Dr. Nixara, a Luminian healer who had been watching from the back of the room. This is barbaric. You are assaulting that patient. Jake looked up, confused. This is a standard life-saving procedure. It keeps people alive until their heart starts beating again. You are breaking her bones and forcing yourself on her, Nixara said, his glowing body pulsing with angry red light. This is not medicine, this is violence, Jake tried to explain. Sometimes we have to cause small injuries to prevent death. Breaking a rib is better than letting someone die. The students were now talking excitedly among themselves in their various languages. Jake could tell they were upset, but he pressed on with his demonstration. Next, I will show you the Heimlich maneuver, Jake said. This is used when someone is choking. He asked another volunteer to stand up and turned them around so their back was toward him. Jake wrapped his arms around the volunteer and made a fist below their ribcage. You thrust upward and inward to force the object out of their throat, Jake said, demonstrating the motion. More gasps from the audience. What Jake saw as a life-saving technique, the alien saw as a violent attack from behind. You are squeezing their internal organs, a student called out. That could cause serious damage. It could, Jake agreed, but choking to death causes more damage than a bruised stomach. The demonstration continued to get worse. Jake showed them how to perform an emergency tracheotomy, cutting a hole in someone's throat to help them breathe. He demonstrated how to set a broken bone by pulling it back into place. He even showed them how to give an injection by pushing a needle through the skin. Each procedure horrified the alien students more than the last. They saw cutting, stabbing, squeezing, and forcing. They could not understand how these violent actions could be considered healing. The final shock came when Jake decided to show them that humans could tolerate pain much better than most species. He took out a syringe and gave himself an injection of antibiotics, pushing the needle into his own arm without any numbing medicine. The students screamed. Several of them fainted. Others ran from the room. To them, Jake had just stabbed himself for no reason. You see, Jake said, still not understanding their reaction. Humans can handle pain that would be unbearable to most species. This lets us perform procedures that might seem impossible to others. Dr. Nixara stepped forward, his whole body glowing bright red with anger and fear. This demonstration is over, he announced. Students, please leave immediately. What you have witnessed today goes against every principle of civilized medicine. As the students filed out, many of them were crying or making distressed sounds. Jake heard words like torture, barbaric, and savage being whispered in different Languages. Jake stood alone in the empty amphitheater, finally beginning to understand how badly things had gone wrong. What he thought was education had turned into a horror show for the alien students. Dr. Zixthera approached him, her crystal body flashing colors Jake had never seen before. "Dr. Morrison," she said quietly, "I have just received an emergency communication from the Galactic Medical Council. Dr. Nixara has filed a formal complaint against you. He is claiming that humans practice what he calls warfare medicine, and that your techniques violate the fundamental principle of do no harm." Jake felt his heart sink. "But I was just showing them how to save lives." "I know," Zixthera said, sadly. "But they see it differently. They see violence disguised as medicine. They see a species that hurts patients in order to heal them." "What happens now?" Jake asked. "The Medical Council is meeting tomorrow to discuss whether humans should be allowed to practice medicine in galactic space," Zixthera replied. "They are very concerned about what they saw today." Jake walked back to his quarters feeling defeated. He had wanted to share human medical knowledge with the galaxy, but instead, he had terrified an entire generation of alien medical students. As he sat in his room, Jake thought about the differences between humans and aliens. The aliens came from safe, peaceful worlds where medicine was gentle and slow. Humans came from a dangerous world where medicine had to be fast and sometimes violent to save lives. Jake looked at his medical diploma on the wall and read the Hippocratic oath again. First, do no harm. But what did that really mean? Did it mean never causing pain, even to save a life? Or did it mean preventing the greatest harm possible, even if it required causing smaller harms along the way? Tomorrow he would have to defend not just his own actions, but the entire philosophy of human medicine. He would have to explain why sometimes the kindest thing a doctor could do was to cause pain, and why sometimes saving a life required actions that looked like violence. Jake spent the night preparing his defense, knowing that the future of human medicine in the galaxy depended on his ability to make the aliens understand that cruelty and kindness were sometimes the same thing. Jake woke up to emergency alarms blaring throughout the station. This time, the alarms were not soft and musical. They were harsh and urgent, which meant something very serious was happening. He grabbed his medical bag and ran toward the emergency bay. As he moved through the corridors, he saw alien doctors and nurses rushing in all directions. Their usual calm behavior was gone, replaced by panic and fear. Dr. Zixthera met him at the entrance to the emergency bay. Her crystal body was flashing rapid colors that Jake had never seen before. "What is happening?" Jake asked. "Crimson fever," Zixthera said, her voice shaking. "A cargo ship brought it from an unexplored system. It spreads through the air and affects 7 different species. We have never seen anything like it." Jake followed her into the emergency bay and saw chaos. Dozens of patients lay on beds, their bodies covered with red spots and rashes. Many were having trouble breathing. Some were unconscious. "What is your treatment protocol?" Jake asked. Dr. Kielnara approached them, all 6 of her arms trembling. "We are setting up isolation chambers for each patient. Then we begin the standard treatment cycle. First, we analyze the disease for 6 months to understand it completely. Then we develop a gentle treatment plan that will take another year to complete." Jake stared at her. "A year and a half? How many patients will die by then?" "We estimate 60% mortality," Kielnara said quietly. "But we cannot rush treatment. It would be dangerous to act without complete understanding." Jake looked around the room again. He could see patients getting worse by the hour. Some were clearly dying. The alien doctors were moving slowly and carefully, following their normal procedures even as people died around them. "This is insane," Jake muttered. "You have an epidemic, and you are going to spend 6 months studying it?" "It is the proper way," Dr. Nixara said as he approached. "We do not take risks with patient safety. Unlike some species, we do not practice violent medicine." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "What about experimental treatments, emergency protocols?" "We do not have such things," Zixthera said. "All treatments must be tested for 50 years before we use them on patients. It is the law." Jake watched a young alien patient struggling to breathe. The creature was clearly dying, but the alien doctors were following their slow, careful procedures while it suffered. "I request permission to try human emergency protocols," Jake said. The alien doctors stared at him in horror. "Absolutely not," Nixara said. "We have seen your violent methods. We will not allow you to experiment on dying patients." "They are dying anyway under your methods," Jake pointed out. "That is unfortunate, but we cannot abandon our principles," Nixara replied. Jake made a decision that would change everything. He walked over to the dying patient and began examining them. The alien doctors moved to stop him, but Jake spoke firmly. "I am a licensed doctor on this station. I have the right to treat patients in emergency situations. You do not have permission to use untested treatments," Nixara said angrily. "Then I will use tested treatments," Jake replied. "These are all standard human protocols that have been used for hundreds of years." Jake began working quickly. He set up IV lines to give patients fluids and nutrients. He used oxygen masks to help them breathe. He gave them medicines to reduce fever and fight infection. The alien doctors watched in horror as Jake moved from patient to patient, using what they considered violent and dangerous methods. He touched patients directly with his hands to examine them. He put needles in their arms. He gave them chemicals that had not been tested by galactic standards. "Stop this immediately," Nixara demanded. "You are violating every principle of safe medicine." Jake ignored him and continued working. Within hours, he could see improvements in his patients. Their breathing became easier. Their fevers went down. The red rashes began to fade. By the end of the day, Jake had treated 43 patients using human emergency protocols. 38 of them were showing clear signs of recovery. The alien doctors could not believe what they were seeing. But the situation got worse when Chief Medical Officer Zixathera collapsed from the disease. The alien doctors began preparing her for the standard long-term treatment, but Jake could see she was dying rapidly. "Let me treat her," Jake said. "Never," Nixara replied. "We will not let you experiment on our Chief Medical Officer." Jake watched as Zixathera's condition worsened. The alien doctors moved slowly through their procedures while she slipped closer to death. Finally, Jake could not stand it anymore. "I am treating her whether you like it or not," Jake said. "She will be dead in 2 hours if I do not act now." Jake pushed past the alien doctors and began emergency treatment on Zixathera. He used aggressive medication to fight the infection. He supported her failing organs with machines and chemicals. He did everything he could to keep her alive. The alien doctors were horrified. They called security to stop Jake, but he refused to leave his patient. For 6 hours, Jake fought to save Zixathera's life, while alien security guards watched and alien doctors protested. Finally, Zixathera's condition stabilized. Her crystal body began to flash with healthy colors again. She would live. But Jake's actions had consequences. Within hours, representatives from the Galactic Medical Council arrived at the station. They placed Jake under arrest for medical assault, violation of patient consent protocols, and practicing unauthorized medicine. As they led Jake away in restraints, he could see his patients recovering in their beds. 41 of the 43 patients he had treated were now completely healthy. Under the alien medical system, most of them would have died. Dr. Nixara approached Jake as the guards prepared to take him away. "You may have saved their lives," Nixara said, "but you violated every law of civilized medicine to do it. You cannot just decide to ignore our protocols because you think you know better." Jake looked back at the emergency bay one last time. His patients were sitting up in their beds, talking and laughing with their families. They were alive because he had been willing to break the rules. "Sometimes saving lives is more important than following rules," Jake said. As the transport ship carried Jake away from Medical Station Harmony, he knew his trial would determine the future of human medicine in the galaxy. He had proven that human methods could save lives, but he had also terrified the aliens with his willingness to take risks and cause pain in order to heal. The galaxy would now have to decide whether saving lives quickly was worth the fear and discomfort that came with human medicine. Jake hoped they would choose lives over comfort, but he was not sure they would. Through the window of the transport ship, Jake could see Medical Station Harmony growing smaller in the distance. Somewhere on that station, 41 patients were alive because he had been willing to practice medicine the human way. Whether the galaxy would thank him or punish him for that remained to be seen. The trial took place on Galactic Prime, the capital world of the Medical Council. Jake sat in a chair that was too small for him, surrounded by hundreds of alien doctors, judges, and officials. The courtroom was a massive dome filled with floating platforms where different species could sit according to their needs. The prosecutor was a tall, thin alien with purple skin and 4 eyes. His name was Judge Vex Malik, and he spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. Dr. Jake Morrison, Judge Vex Malik began, you stand accused of medical assault, violation of patient consent protocols, and practicing unauthorized medicine. How do you plead? Jake stood up slowly. I plead not guilty, he said clearly. A murmur went through the crowd. Many of the aliens had expected him to ask for mercy or try to explain his actions. They had not expected him to claim innocence. Not guilty? Judge Vex Malik asked. You admit that you performed procedures without proper authorization. You admit that you caused pain to patients. You admit that you used untested treatments. How can you claim to be not guilty? Jake looked around the courtroom. He could see fear and disgust in many of the alien faces watching him. But he also saw curiosity. Some of them wanted to understand why he had done what he did. I am not guilty of doing harm, Jake said. Everything I did was to save lives and reduce suffering. That is what doctors are supposed to do. The prosecutor began presenting his case. He showed videos of Jake performing CPR, calling it violent assault on an unconscious victim. He showed Jake giving injections, calling it stabbing patients, with metal weapons. He showed Jake performing surgery, calling it cutting open living beings without their permission. Each piece of evidence made the alien audience more horrified. They saw violence and cruelty where Jake saw healing and hope. This human practices what we can only call warfare medicine, the prosecutor said. He attacks the body to force it, to heal. He causes pain to prevent pain. He violates the most basic principle of medicine, which is to do no harm. When it was time for Jake's defense, he stood up and walked to the center of the courtroom. He had no lawyer because no alien attorney wanted to defend him. He would have to speak for himself. I want to tell you about my planet, Jake began. Earth is what you call a Class 12 death world. Everything on my planet is trying to kill us. We have diseases that can kill in hours. We have animals that hunt us. We have weather that can freeze or burn us to death. We have earthquakes, floods, fires, and storms. The alien audience listened with fascination and horror. Most of them came from peaceful worlds where the biggest danger might be a small storm or a minor illness. On Earth, people die quickly if doctors do not act quickly, Jake continued. We do not have the luxury of spending months studying a problem while patients suffer. We learn to save lives fast, even if it means causing some pain or taking some risks. Jake activated a holographic display that showed medical statistics from Earth and from various alien worlds. On my planet, a patient having a heart attack has a 90% chance of survival if treated within the first hour. On your worlds, heart attacks are so rare that most doctors have never seen one. When they do happen, your gentle treatments have a 20% survival rate because they take too long. The numbers were shocking to the alien audience. They had never considered that their careful, gentle medicine might actually be less effective than human methods. Let me tell you about the Hippocratic Oath, Jake said. He projected the ancient text on the wall of the courtroom. It says, first, do no harm. But what does that really mean? Jake looked directly at Judge Vex Malik. Does it mean never causing pain, even if that pain saves a life? Does it mean never taking risks, even if not taking risks means certain death? Or does it mean preventing the greatest possible harm, even if it requires causing smaller harms along the way? The courtroom was completely silent. This was a question none of them had ever considered. During the Crimson Fever outbreak, I saved 41 lives using human medical techniques, Jake continued. Under your medical system, 38 of those patients would have died while waiting for gentle treatment to begin. Tell me, which Approach causes more harm. My quick, painful treatments that save lives or your gentle treatments that let people die? Judge Vexmalik looked uncomfortable. The statistics were hard to argue with. But you caused pain to patients, the judge said. You cut into their bodies. You forced chemicals into their bloodstreams. You manipulated their organs with your hands. These are acts of violence. No, Jake said firmly. These are acts of love. The courtroom erupted in surprise sounds. Love was not a word they expected to hear in a medical trial. On Earth, we have a saying, Jake explained. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. When a child runs toward a fire, you grab them and pull them back, even though you might hurt their arm. When someone is drowning, you might break their ribs while performing CPR. But breaking ribs is better than letting them die. Jake paused and looked around the courtroom. Every painful procedure I performed was done out of love for my patients. Love that made me willing to cause small hurts to prevent big hurts. Love that made me willing to take risks to save lives. At that moment, the courtroom doors opened. Dr. Zixthera entered, her crystal body glowing with healthy colors. Behind her came dozens of patients that Jake had treated during the outbreak. Your Honor, Zixthera said, I request permission to speak on behalf of Dr. Morrison. The judge looked surprised, but nodded his permission. Dr. Morrison saved my life, Zixthera said. His methods seemed violent and frightening to us, but they worked. Without his willingness to cause me pain, I would have died. All of these patients would have died. One by one, the patients spoke about how Jake had saved their lives. They talked about the pain of his treatments, but also about the joy of being alive to see their families again. The trial lasted 3 days. In the end, the Galactic Medical Council reached a decision that would change medicine throughout the galaxy. Dr. Morrison, Judge Vexmalik announced, this court finds you not guilty of medical assault. We have learned that there are different ways to interpret the principle of do no harm. Your methods are frightening to us, but they are also effective. The judge paused and looked around the courtroom. The Galactic Medical Council hereby establishes new protocols for emergency medicine. Human medical techniques will be available for use in life-threatening situations where traditional methods are insufficient. Jake felt relief wash over him. Thank you, Your Honor. However, the judge continued, these techniques will only be used by specially trained doctors who understand both human and alien physiology. You, Dr. Morrison, are appointed as the first director of emergency medicine for the Galactic Medical Service. 6 months later, Jake stood in a new medical facility on Galactic Prime. Around him, alien medical students practiced human emergency techniques while wearing protective gear. They were still frightened by the aggressive methods, but they were learning to use them when necessary. Dr. Kielnara approached him, all 6 of her arms carrying medical equipment. The new protocols are working well, she reported. Emergency survival rates have improved by 300% across all member worlds. Jake smiled as he watched a Luminian student successfully perform CPR on a training dummy. The student was shaking with fear, but he was doing it correctly. It is still hard for us to understand, Kielnara continued, how healing can look so much like hurting. But we are learning that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is cause a little pain. To prevent a lot of pain, Jake nodded. The Hippocratic oath means the same thing to all of us, he said. We just had different ideas about how to follow it. Now we can use the best of both approaches. Gentle healing when possible, aggressive treatment when necessary. Jake looked out the window at the stars. He thought about how far they had all come. The galaxy had learned that medicine could be both violent and loving, both frightening and healing. And humans had learned that their harsh world had given them something valuable to share with the universe. The knowledge that sometimes you have to fight death itself to save a life. The Hippocratic oath still hung on Jake's wall, but now it was translated into 17 different alien languages. The words were the same, but now the entire galaxy understood what they truly meant.